Hey guys, what's going on? It's Nightharrow here. Man, I am excited for this video. I've been excited for this video for quite a while. This is actually the second time I've recorded it, which is honestly not too atypical for me, but there were some reasons that I went ahead and recorded this a second time. So yeah, anyways, with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So what I want to talk about today is raid group optimization. And I think this is huge for newer groups, for people that are not particularly sweaty, for people that are more casual. And I talked about in my last video, hopefully, if you haven't seen it, I try to convince you why it is, raid group optimization is important. And it's even more important for new groups. I think it's the biggest misconception in the in-game right now is that people think that this is just for sweaty people, they're tryhards. And it really is just for everybody because it'll make content easier for you and it'll make it more enjoyable. And that's what we want, right? We're all here to have fun. So let's go ahead and talk about it. First thing we should go over before we even look at this spreadsheet here is let's talk about gear tiers, because this is something that I think is really helpful. So how I structure it and how I usually, this is my own mental construct, but I would say tier 1 gear sets are sets that directly increase DPS. So this is Yolnagrin. Yolnagrin gives you spell power and weapon damage, and so that directly translates to damage. Spell power cure does the same thing. Other sets, Roaring Opportunist, that directly increases your DPS. Those are tier 1 sets. And the way the tiers, there's 3 tiers, and the way it works is you always want to be wearing the highest, or in this case, I guess the lowest number value. So you always want to be wearing tier 1 sets if you at all can. And then if you have problems, you move down to the lower tiers. Now, tier 2 sets are sets that indirectly increase damage. And I know this is a little bit fuzzily defined, but what I mean by that is sustained sets, something like Stone Talker or Wormcult. Those sets increase DPS by making sure your damage dealers don't run out of mag and stam. Because if they run out of either one of those, their damage is going to go way down. So tier 2 sets indirectly increase damage by making sure you have resources and other things like that. There's a couple other obscure sets in there, but just trust me, that's kind of like the secondary, that they increase damage in a secondary way. It's not direct. Now, the third tier sets are going to be sets that keep people alive. Okay, so these are survival sets. Now, I would group both tank survival sets and also things that will help keep the group alive in that same category. The reason you want to move down to these tiers is if you're the tank and you're dying, everybody else is going to die probably in short order. So if you need to put on a survival set, you should absolutely do that. And don't feel shame and don't feel bad about it. You want to try to wear tier 1 sets if you can, but if you're dying, other people are dying, certainly move down to that third tier and just go with that, get through the content, and then you can kind of learn and improve at a later date once you've cleared the content, hopefully, or that particular trial is over. If you're on a healer, this might be a set that reduces the damage taken by the group or increases your healing on the group. So if you have people that are new, they don't know where to stand, you're trying to get them to stack properly and they're overlapping AoEs, and so they're taking way more damage than they should. This is where you would wear sets like that. So something like a Gossamer or some other set that just directly increases your healing. There's several of them. So we always want to be wearing tier 1 sets, and I'm kind of assuming in this situation most of the time, not always, if you have really new groups or if you're a new tank, you can wear tier 1 sets, or maybe tier 2 if the DPS is struggling. But most of the time you can wear tier 1 sets and not have a problem. For tanks, you absolutely do not need those survival sets in most situations. And again, I'm going to go into tanking and healing videos, and I'm going to talk about sets you would wear, what you would switch out, how you would do that, how you can still keep yourself alive, but still be wearing those tier 1 sets, or only having to wear like a tier 2 set or something like that. So I'm going to go through all that in the other videos, but I just want you to know for this video, I'm kind of assuming we're at a spot where we can all be wearing tier 1 sets. And so that's very important for you to know. So right here, I've got a spreadsheet that I made. Hopefully this doesn't seem too intimidating. Now, this is a curated list. I don't include every set in the game on here, but I do include quite a few, and most of the ones that I think are important right now. And this is a living document. I've got a link to this, which I'll put below, and you can go and download it for yourself so that you can modify it and do what you want here. I will also keep this up to date as time goes by, so when the next patch comes out, will update this sheet for you. But basically, I'm just going to go over just a brief overview here. So on the top left here, we have our group composition and sets. So this is going to be our end game here is to come up with what sets and what our group composition we want to be in. And then below here, I have a few sets that you kind of always want in the group. And the reason you always want them is because they're easy to wear. You don't have to do anything crazy to get them to proc. Having them on doesn't make your life more difficult very, very much. And so it's just kind of like, hey, if you can have these, always have these in group. Might as well. Now, some other sets are a little bit harder. Some of these, maybe you have to keep your stam really low. That can be kind of dangerous. You can end up dying if you keep your stam too low, even if you're on a tank even on a healer or a DPS. So that's why some of these go in this category. Some of them are harder to keep good up times. Some of them you might not need in all situations. You can be over the cap for crit example on Elemental Catalyst, etc. But anyways, sorry, I'm going too much into detail right now. Here I have just some miscellaneous notes for everybody. Over here on the right, I have unique class buffs listed. Now, I have some buffs listed that probably don't warrant being on this list, like Crystal Weapon. We're not going to talk about it again. It just doesn't work that well, so until ZOS remakes it or changes it up, probably no one's ever going to be running it. There might be some others here, but for the most part, that's probably the worst one that I can think of. But we're going to walk through that. And then down in the bottom left here, crit damage table. So we're going to use this to calculate our critical damage. There is now a cap. So the base damage on criticals is an extra 50% damage above what you normally do. And then looking at this, we can see that you can easily get to the cap now of 125% extra damage. So plus 125%. So this is just a calculator. We're going to walk through that. And then over here, we have the penetration calculator. And I'm sorry, in between here about the spreadsheet and the author, that's just some info about me and about this spreadsheet where you can find more of my videos, that kind of stuff. And then over here, penetration calculator. So this is going to be important. We'll get into it, but it just calculates the numbers for you to figure out if you're at pen cap or not. And if you're not, you really want to be. So that's kind of one of the first things you'll want to optimize for. All right, so that's done. And again, remember that if I didn't say this at the beginning of the video, if you're not sold on raid group optimization, check out my other video. I've got another sheet here that we can just briefly look at, and you can see this is just to give you some back of the napkin calculations, some theoretical numbers, and you can see that you can end up adding like a third extra damage. So if your group is doing 300,000 total group DPS, and you throw in some buff sets, just the ones you put on a DPS, not including the ones you put on the tanks and healer, you can end up with adding a third damage. So you can end up adding quite a bit of damage, over 100K, to your group if you're doing on a 300,000 DPS basis. So it's like adding 2 or 3 players. It's like being able to hack the trial and add a 14 man or 15 man to a trial. Actually, I think I just found my clickbait thumbnail. 15 men in a trial, how to break the game. I may or may not do that. If I did do that, I'm sorry. I generally hate clickbait, but I got to do something to get people to click on my videos. And not that many people are right now, so I got to do something. So forgive me. So let's start out and say, you know what, Nightharrow, this is all very well and good. Seems like you've done a lot of work here. There's a lot of stuff that you got on this sheet. I don't care. I just want, what's the takeaway? Okay, how do I set up my raid group to be optimized? That's what I have this card here for you. I call these cards, these PDFs, I don't know why, I don't have a better term for them, but I've got a generic trial optimization guide. And again, you'll find this on the shared drive, so it's available to everybody. You can always come by the That Wasn't the Boss Discord server, and I've got it in there. Free to share. Please share it with as many people as you'd like. All right, so with this generic trial optimization card, okay, this is supposed to be something that works pretty good in most situations, isn't ideal maybe in any of them, although it's pretty close in a lot of trials. So let's just talk about it real quickly. We're going to put our main tank in Yolnahkrin. The reason we want him in Yolnahkrin is because that is going to provide a unique buff we can't get anywhere else, and you have to taunt to proc it, so sometimes the off tank can't do that because they don't have anything to taunt. So we put it on our main tank. Turning Tide and Nazare. Now that set is going to work really well together. If you don't know how to use it, I recommend TC Lee's video. I'll link it down below, and you can see that you can proc Turning Tide, and then once it's procced on the target, you go ahead and Warhorn with Nazare, and you end up with a huge damage increase window there. And the best part about that is even if you're in a pug, the tank is in control of this. As long as they know more or less when to do this, it's going to be a huge benefit to the entire group, and they don't have to communicate with anybody else, which is often where things get a little bit more difficult, having good communication in a trial group. So again, this is built for beginners, for newer people. Now on the off tank, we've got several setups here, and it kind of depends. So if your group is mostly in light armor, or if you do not have a DPS with Alkosh on, you're going to want to switch out Saxhleel for Crimson Oath, or even a Alkosh is fine on a tank. It'll give pretty much the same buff, just works a little bit different. So for the off tank here, now I recommend if you have enough penetration, you're not worried about it, then I would put the off tank in Saxhleel. If you do not have enough penetration, or you are concerned about it, then you want to go ahead and put the off tank in something like Crimson Oath's Rive, and that will help with the penetration. For your second set, I would recommend, so I know there's a lot of people out there that are watching this and they're like, Nightharrow, sustain is not an issue anymore. Everybody's fine on sustain. I know that in theory we all could be. I know for a fact that a lot of people still struggle with this, and a lot of groups do. And, they just, a lot of times the average person is behind the meta a fair ways, and maybe they don't know which skills to remorph, and it's complicated. And I think in time, we'll all probably get there, unless something else changes in the near future, which, let's be honest, probably it will. But there's a lot of groups that still need sustain, and so I recommend putting Stone Talker on the tank. Now, the reason we put Stone Talker on the tank instead of the SPC healer is because we want to put Powerful Assault on the Spell Power Cure healer. And the reason for that, it is very easy for the healers typically, compared to the tanks, it's very easy for them to proc Powerful Assault in the group because they're often in the group. And often your tank is not, and it has a very short range. And so even if you're tanking an ad, you got to squeeze up to that ad, and so does the DPS, for you to be able to proc Powerful Assault on them. This way, the tank can just heavy attack the ad or the boss to proc Stone Talker, and the healer can be standing in the middle of the group, and they can go ahead and proc Powerful Assault pretty easily. So there are a couple of different options here if you want to go to something more advanced, either with a light armor group or a heavy armor or a medium armor group. Probably not a heavy armor group. Probably don't want to do that. So then moving on to our healers here, we have Spell Power Cure, Powerful Assault, which we just mentioned. Spell Power Cure, you can also do Olurime. The reason I like Spell Power Cure is because all you have to do is overheal, which typically you're doing all the time. If you do Olurime, people need to stand in the circle, and a lot of people don't know what the circle looks like, and so they're just never going to do it. And so if you have Spell Power Cure, it works in most situations where people just need to be overhealed. Healer can kind of always manage to hit everybody with that, and so that's why I recommend it. Symphony of Blades, that is a monster set that I always recommend having in group, because sustain isn't perfect now, right? You still need something, and Symphony has really good benefit, has a really good sustain it provides to the group, and so I recommend having it on at least one of your healers in pretty much all situations. Now, next up is Roaring Opportunist and Jorvolds. Now, I have been seeing recently a lot of people using Jorvolds with something weird, like maybe SPC, maybe Olo, but like Jorvolds by itself. You absolutely want to pair Roaring Opportunist with Jorvolds. You don't want to use Jorvolds by itself. It doesn't offer that big of a benefit. It's just a terrible idea. I'm sorry. I don't want to disparage anybody who recommends that, but it's generally just not a good idea. Roaring Opportunist with Jorvolds is what you want. In 4-mans, you would still do something different. You wouldn't wear Jorvolds with something other than Roaring Opportunist. It just kind of doesn't make sense. Here nor there, but I just see it a lot. So if you fell for that, or if someone convinced you that that's a good idea, it's probably not. So just something to consider. Take a look at these sets, and you can see that they provide a lot more group utility and a lot more group DPS than you would think. Now, moving on to the DPS. So basically, you end up with a situation here similar to what we did with our off tank, where either you have a light armor group and with light armor provides you with a lot of extra penetration. And so generally, if you have mostly at least 5-piece light armor, you're not going to have much of a problem, if any, with penetration. So in that situation, the trade-off is with medium armor, you get extra crit damage. There's also a little bit of other bonus with spellpower weapon damage, but the main one is with your crit damage. Each piece of medium armor gives you a plus 2% extra crit damage. So in one situation, you have full pen, but you're a little bit lower on critical damage. In the other situation, you're low on pen, but you're high on critical damage. So basically, you end up with kind of a situation where you either want to run Alkosh for the extra penetration, and you want that on a DPS because it'll go up to 6,000 extra penetration for the entire group, and then as opposed to only 3,500. And then the other situation, Elemental Catalyst increases your critical damage done by up to 15%. So if you are in a medium armor setup, you would run Elemental Catalyst to increase your critical damage. If you're in if you're in a light armor setup, you have plenty of penetration and you need the extra critical damage from Elemental Catalyst. If you are in a medium armor setup, then you would run Alkosh on a DPS instead of Elemental Catalyst because you need the penetration. And in theory, you're going to be over on your critical damage cap. And I'll show the numbers that go into this here in a second. So that's kind of a situation. Now you can see my kind of like advanced hybrid setup here. I actually recommend both, and that's because you might end up with both in group. Some people might be in light armor, some people might be in medium, and if you run them both, they don't decrease DPS that much on any one person. And so you'll just want them both so that, everybody's kind of happy, I guess. Next up here is having a Zen's DK, and you need someone to run stagger. It doesn't have to be your Zen's DK. I just put it here to just kind of as a reminder, like, hey, you need stagger. It's another like 3,000 damage. After that is having someone who's a brittled in. Wardens can run brittle really easily with having even a single barred ice staff. And so that's what I recommend there. And then I just note that Templars, then kind of Nightblade and Sork in group provides a lot of unique buffs. So anyways, that's it for this sheet. And again, I would say that, this is just an ideal. I'm not saying that this is what you need to have. I'm just saying that this is something that would be good to have and would probably help your group if you did have. And so oftentimes when I'm putting up trials and I'm asking for gear, I put that it's, this is aspirational, but hey, here's some stuff that we want. And just so you know, I'm not leaving you hanging. I am going to have build guides on how to do a Zen's DK, and they're going to be out very quickly, and how to do a Brittled In, how to rock Alkosh on a DPS, etc. With caveats and important notes, sometimes people try to put too many buff sets on one person. You can do that to some extent, but typically you end up with a greater DPS loss than if you share that among several DPS. So that is what I will be recommending. If you are someone who has a DK, who has a Warden, who plays any DPS class, you can throw an Alkosh, or if you have a Necromancer who can run Elemental Catalyst, I highly, highly recommend you get those sets. Another cool thing about having those sets is that when the meta changes, those sets are still going to be desired. And so you don't have to go farm as many sets because you've already got one. And you can just be like, hey, I'm coming to group and I'm the EC Crow when I come to group. And people know that and they'll just slot you. And you'll end up getting slotted a lot more because a lot of groups, especially when you get into more serious groups, will start to require this stuff. And it's like, now we got a spot. And if we got to choose between you and someone who has a buff set, we're going to choose the person who has the buff set every single time. So if you're that person that has the buff set, you're going to get put in the group a lot more often. And then all you got to worry about is up times and stuff from there. So looking at this sheet, let's go ahead and just let's make a group. Okay. So let's say to start off with, as far as classes and everything like that, for most groups, what everybody's bringing, you're not going to have much of a choice. Okay. Right. Like everybody has a class that they're comfortable on, and that's what they're bringing, and that's what they're best at. And that's totally fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Absolutely do that, especially for tanks and healers. Don't make someone bring some weird class or some class that's weird to them, some class they're not used to playing, because they're not going to do very good, and they're probably going to die a lot more. I think there's a time and a place where you can learn and get better, but I wouldn't be like, hey, you need to come on a Templar or Nightblade tank because we need minor savagery, or we need, minor sorcery or something in the group. Just take what you got, and that's more important than a little bit of damage increase, because if they die, obviously, or they're not doing their job keeping other people alive, that's going to be a lot more of a DPS decrease than not having, you know, all the optimal buff sets and group buffs. So again, we're just going to assume though that you're taking what you've got. So if you can get, you know, one of every class, you'll probably try to do that just so that you have all the buffs in your group. Now, the other thing next thing you want to be concerned about is like, is my group running mostly light armor or mostly medium? Now, we're just going to go through two situations. We're going to pretend, okay? Let's say that the group is running mostly light armor, okay? So let's go ahead and just go ahead and calculate that. So we've got our base critical damage is going to be 50%. That's good. Minor force, now that's going to be from Beast Trap or from Channeled Acceleration. So we're going to assume that pretty much everybody is running that. We've got it in group. There are other sources, but in general, you'll just use it on your bar. Minor brittle. So we're going to assume that we've got a brittled in the group. So we'll want that, or at least in this hypothetical situation. From the kilt, that's going to be another 10%. Right now, that's meta, so everybody's going to be running the kilt in almost all situations. Elemental catalyst, we're going to assume we also have that in the group. Shadow Mundus, I just put that here as a reminder that is a thing. Most people are not running it. I don't recommend that you run it. Backstabber. So, and everywhere but Sunspire, you're going to have that. In Sunspire, you're never going to have it, at least not on the bosses. So you would need to go through here and put a 0, and you can see that it dynamically calculates. Now, if you look here, let's say we are in Sunspire, so we put a 0 here. And we go down, we have Warhorn, that's giving us 20%. And then we said we're going to be in light armor. So this is going to be pretty much 0. Maybe we have, you know what, we probably have kilt on, so we'll say 1. Okay. It could be 2 if we wanted to also rock, you know, our monster helm for our crit piece, like Slimecraw. If we had that medium, we could do that there. And then we see we're at 117%. So we're a little bit low. So there might be something else we want to try to figure out what we can do. Now, if you're a Khajiit, that'll give you a bonus. If you're a Nightblade, a Warden, or a Templar, both have class passives that can give them increased critical damage. And then Major Brittle, which is from a monster set, the Nunatech, which I don't recommend currently. Not that you couldn't run it, not that it's not potentially good in some situations. I'm just not recommending it currently. So you'll kind of see here that you still end up a bit under crit if you're in Sunspire. And so, you know, that might be something where you want to try to do something a little bit different. But just realize you are going to make sure you want all these things in group. You're definitely going to want Elemental Catalyst. You're definitely going to want Minor Brittle. Hopefully you get close to 100% uptimes on those. You're definitely going to want your Major Force from your Warhorn. You're going to be needing to Warhorn a lot. Now, let's say we're not in Sunspire, so we do have our Backstabber bonus, and we can see that we end up well over the crit, which is great. Now, that is a situation where we have 100% uptime on everything, and that's not going to happen, even if it was just Warhorn that we were under. So just realize that you're not always going to be at cap in all situations, but that's something you can try to do to increase your group DPS. So now we're in light armor. So we want to go over here and look at our penetration calculator, and what are we going to end up with? So we've got Major Breach and Minor Breach. Those are both going to be applied by the tank pretty much 100% of the time. Infused Crusher Enchant, we're mostly concerned with boss fights. I have thought about and will likely add a trash calculator to this. And then we've got, do we have Alkosh in the group? For right now, we're going to say no. Do we have Crimson Oath in the group? Again, for right now, we're going to say no. Tremor Scale is going to be fixed or updated in the next patch, so that will be an option at that point. Now, Light Armor. We're assuming everybody's running at least 5 pieces of Light Armor. And then Piercing CP, it's free damage. You don't have to slot it. So if you've got the CP, you'll have that. So we're just going to kind of assume that everybody has it at this point. You could run 1 piece of Valkynscoria or Crag to increase your penetration. That's what the 1 piece bonus on those monster sets does. If you're a Nightblade and you're flanking, you're going to get extra penetration. This is wasted, as is the Necromancer for the most part, because you're never going to build specifically for that in your group. So I really wish they would update some stuff with Nightblades, because a lot of their bonuses, just like with crit damage, aren't useful, unfortunately. So it is what it is. But with that situation, we still end up under penetrating by almost 2,000. So in that situation, what we might do is we might throw our off tank in Crimson Oath, which is what I mentioned earlier, and or Alkosh. Alkosh on a support on a tank will also do about the same amount of damage, and you end up at full penetration. So that's probably what you want to do in that situation, is make sure that your tank is in as Crimson Oath, Rive, or Alkosh to help the group reach maximum penetration. Now, other things you could do if you didn't have that, or if you're in a pug group, is you could add in the one piece monster helm. Instead of doing one piece crit, you could do one piece penetration, and that puts you almost there. You're underpinning by a little bit, but not by very much. So this is how you would get your group set up, and so you would realize, okay, well, I'm not going to need Alkosh on a DPS up here, so I can take that away. I still want Zen, Stagger. I still want one of each class, so that's all good. I still want EC and on a Necromancer, because they don't lose very much damage for running Elemental Catalyst. Still want a Brittledin for the minor brittle, and then again, Nightblade and Sorcerer, minor savagery and minor prophecy, respectively, is good. Now, what if you have a group that is mostly Stam? So we're going to run through do everything again, but we're going to assume that we have a Stam group. So we'll start over here with critical damage. We're going to go ahead and move this up and say they have at least 5 pieces. They'll probably actually have 6, but just go with me here. So assuming they have 5 pieces, we can see that we are way over and at 140%. So what we can do if we're in a group like that is we can take off EC. And if we take off EC, we end up at 125%, and that's perfect. Now, remember that your Warhorn's not going to be up all the time, especially in a newer group. You're not going to be that organized or that optimized. It's just not going to happen, okay? Even if it could, it's probably not. And then also realize that all these buff sets, even Elemental Catalyst, on the back page here, we calculated a low up time of like 66%. So it's not going to be all the time. So it might be the situation that even in a group that is all running medium armor, that you still want Elemental Catalyst, because if you're under that cap and you can increase up to that cap, it's going to be a pretty big damage increase. And you can see that on the back page, what it calculates to. So even if you're with a medium armor group, you might still run Elemental Catalyst. That's still a thing you can do. But for right now, we're going to say we're going to have really good up times. We don't need to run it. We can drop it. And then if you go over here to look at the rest of also, if you're in Sunspire and you don't have Backstabber, that would be another situation where you would definitely want to have Elemental Catalyst even in a medium armor based group. And you start to see why I'm recommending a medium armor based group more over light armor. But then we look at penetration. So, minor, major breach, Crusher, we're going to have it. In this situation, well, we'll see, but we're going to want someone in Alkosh. We're going to say that we're not putting a tank in it for right now. We go down here to light armor pieces, and we're going to put 0. Or, you know what, let's put 1, because a lot of times I run 1 light armor piece. We've still got our piercing CP, and we see that we are under by 5,500, almost 6,000. Now, if we put someone in Alkosh, 1 DPS in Alkosh, we're good. We don't need to do anything else. If we don't have a DPS that's in Alkosh, unfortunately, I've really been trying to push DPS to get Alkosh, because it's easy. Pretty much any DPS can wear it, and all you got to do is use synergies to proc it. But here nor there. You could also put a tank in either Alkosh or in Crimson Oath. Probably in Crimson Oath is what you're going to go with. And then you end up a lot closer. So in that situation, you would probably still want your DPS to do 1 piece penetration, and you're still underpinning by like 500. So that is a problem. So you kind of see that with a medium armor group, you can get better benefits, although just having a random group, it's probably better to go light armor just to make sure you're at full penetration. But it's kind of here or there. It depends on your group, depends what you guys are running. I personally am recommending my groups to try to run medium, at least 5 pieces, and then to go with Alkosh in the group. And then they can drop Elemental Catalyst depending on the situation and not have to run that. So typically you would kind of run one or the other. Now, in reality, you're going to end up with both of these situations, okay? You're going to end up with some people running light and some people running medium. And while you can encourage them maybe over time to learn to, wear one of the other sets, I don't tell any of my groups that they have to wear light or medium. maybe some of the harder groups, I'd be like, hey guys, we're going to optimize for one of these or the other if we're trying to do hard modes or something like that, or if we want to do maybe some of the trifectas, the easier ones. Certainly, if you get into the harder ones, you're going to want to be more optimized than this. But if you don't want to just tell someone like, "Hey, wear this," because if they're running out of magicka or stamina and they can't cast abilities, their DPS is going to like fall through the floor. It's going to be really bad. And so you don't want to make anybody wear something that they're not prepared to wear. Just keep that in mind. And I'm not advocating for that in general too. Let people wear what they want to wear. You want them to wear the things that are best, most, DPS optimizing. Don't want someone in a heavy attack build if they're not going to provide any unique buffs and they don't have a reason to be using something like that. Sure. But besides that, I just say let people, at least for me personally, I just let people wear whatever they want to wear. And so in that situation, what you would do is you go through here and you'd say, okay, well, yeah, we're only going to have one piece of light armor. Definitely, we're going to do that. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to say, well, for our crit damage, we've only got one piece of medium, which is basically like saying none, right? So in that situation, we see that, okay, we absolutely want EC in the group if we do that. Just to get us to cap, even if, and that'll help us be closer to cap more of the time, even when we don't have our war horns up. So in that situation, we're going to have it. And then for penetration, we're absolutely going to need Alkosh in the group. And then if you look up here in the top left, you're going to see, hey, that's basically the alternate setup I have here. So the first one is kind of the simple setup, but the alternate one here, you've got a DPS in Alkosh, you've got one in Minor Brittle, one in Elemental Catalyst, you've got a Zen's DK, you've got a Minor Sorcery on your Templar, Nightblade, Sork, etc. But the 3 or 4 main sets you're going to have Alkosh, Zen's Redress, a Warden running Minor Brittle, and then a Necromancer running Elemental Catalyst. So you're going to have 4 DPS buff sets in your group. And basically what we've done by doing that is we've recreated the advanced hybrid setup that I have over here on the generic trial optimization card. So that's where that comes from. I kind of assumed that, hey, you're running everything in the kitchen sink. People are coming in light armor. People are coming in medium armor. How do you optimize for that? And that's what I've done here. Now, let's talk about supports a little bit here, what you would change out. So you can see that, you might need Crimson Oath on your tank, as we saw with the penetration calculator. You might need Stone Talker for resources, for regen in your group, and so you would do that. If you don't have problems reaching pin cap, and you also don't have, because you have a DPS in Alkosh, and you also have a group that doesn't need Stone Talker, then what I would recommend is Sax and Powerful Assault, and then Encratis. Now, on the supports, we're always going to have one healer pretty much in Rojo. For their monster set, they could use Spalder. That's an option. They could also use Symphony of Blades. And then typically you wouldn't have that Rojo healer also wearing the Pearls of El Nofe, which if you have low mag, will give you more ultimate back, just because you're heavy attacking quite often to proc Roaring Opportunist. And so it's twice every 22 seconds, which takes 6 seconds. So it's quite often. And you might not be able to proc that very well. So instead you would put that on your SPC healer. So you're putting them in Spell Power Cure. Again, Olarime is something else you can use. Typically you'll want Spell Power Cure though, so I would grab that set first. And then, in the first situation where your tank is not wearing Powerful Assault because they're wearing Stone Talker or Crimson Oath, you can put your SPC healer in Powerful Assault. Then they can run Symphony of Blades, or potentially they could run the Pearls of El Nofe. And then for the more advanced setup, you would actually do Spell Power Cure and then Martial Knowledge. Martial Knowledge increases damage by up to 8% just by light attacking when your stamina is below 50%, if I am remembering that correctly. I'll pop it up on the screen here. So it can't be procced all the time, so it ends up only being like a 5% damage increase, but it's still 5%, and all you have to do is keep your stamina low and be light attacking. So that's why we recommend that. And then again, you would swap who was wearing Symphony of Blades, who's wearing Spalder, so if your SPC healer is going to wear Pearls of El Nofe, then you might have your Rojo healer wearing Symphony of Blades. If your Rojo healer is going to be in Spalder of Ruin, so Spalder of Ruin reduces your recovery. And so you put it on your heavy attack person so that they're getting resources back mainly by heavy attacking in that situation. And then you can put Symphony on your other healer. And that's it. That's what all this stuff is telling you. Okay. So again, these are sets. If you don't have all of them, these are the ones that are very easy for people to wear. These are the ones that are a little bit harder for people to wear. And so you might want to take that into consideration. I don't recommend putting a new healer in Spalder of Ruin or even in Martial Knowledge because they have to keep their resources low. Same with the Pearls of El Nofe. If you know that they're pretty capable and they want to move towards that direction, absolutely, you could put it in it. Even if they don't use it all the time, they're in it and they can use it some on some fights and kind of get more comfortable with it and gradually do it on more difficult fights. And if that's you, that's what you can do. But anyways, guys, I think that's it for this video. I've probably been talking for an hour. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully this is helpful for you. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I am more than happy to answer them as best I can. I will not be giving specific raid advice on every situation. If I get a couple of those questions, I'll try to answer them. If I start getting a bunch, I just can't. That's why I made all this. Hopefully you can figure it out for yourself. If this is not clear or you have difficulties with this or something or feedback for me, I would love to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. Even if it's negative, I take all the feedback I can. I can always improve, and I realize that. So I'm happy to add something. If you feel like I've omitted something, whatever the case may be, drop it in the comments below. Try to be constructive, but I'm more than happy to hear it. I would really appreciate that even. So because it just helps me, and I'm just trying to help the community. So if we can do that together, then that's great. That's amazing. If you have watched this long and you think, hey, this is a really cool sheet, this is really cool, you like what I'm doing, do me a favor. Share my videos if you like them, if they're good. Share them because I'm trying to do this for a living. I would love to get some more subscribers. Definitely like and subscribe and all that stuff. But if it's good quality content and then you feel good sharing it with other people, hopefully they do the same, and then the entire community benefits. And I would really appreciate that personally because again I'm trying to do this. I would love to do this for a living. So. Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks for watching. Just so you know, in my other videos, what I'm going to be going over here, I'm going to do one on how to do each one of these buff sets, how to run Alkosh on your character, how to do Zen's DK, and they're going to be quick build guides. Normally, I don't do build guides. And I'm also going to be updating my videos on tanking and healing gear, and I'm going to go much more in depth because I know a lot of you are probably wondering, well, what about on a healer when I have people just dying because they're standing in the wrong place? I don't have any of those sets on here. I'm not recommending it because this is about optimization. I'm going to go over those sets, okay, in those other videos. So they're going to be in the series. Just take a look on the channel and you should be able to find them. I'll have them out a few days after this one, each kind of in series. And I just want to say thanks again. Thank you to Daedric, thank you to Natsu, and all the other people that have helped give advice either in the past or recently for this video. I really appreciate it, guys. And hopefully it helps me, and then I can in turn help the community. So with that, we'll see you in the next one.